It's already the last day of Summerfest. I'm Charlie Sykes. Sunday Insight starts right now. Good morning and welcome to Sunday Insight. In the week that was, the FBI decides against charging Hillary Clinton criminally for her use of a private email server. Scott Walker endorses Donald Trump and gets a speaking slot at next week's Republican convention. Milwaukee aldermen approve another $20 million for the downtown streetcar. But we start with this. Two controversial shootings by police in Baton Rouge and in Minnesota, both captured on video that sparked controversy and inflamed passions, followed by this. A massacre of police officers in Dallas at a Black Lives Matter protest. Multiple snipers in elevated positions opened fire on the officers who were protecting the protesters. The death toll, 5 dead, 7 wounded, a nation stunned. It was the worst attack on law enforcement since 9/11. At a press conference from Warsaw, Poland Friday morning, President Obama called the attack vicious, calculated, and despicable.
I believe that I speak for every single American when I say that we are horrified over these events and that we stand united with the people and the police department in Dallas.
The Dallas police chief said that one of the shooters was upset about recent police shootings and wanted to, quote, kill white people, especially white officers. Joining me in our panel this morning, the Milwaukee Community Journal's Michael Holt, former State Representative Michelle Litchens, political strategist Linda Bruin, and the president of Edge Messaging, Brian Fraley. We'll start with you, Michael. I don't want to, take this too far, but I mean, you get the sense that America's at a tipping point, a boiling point. How bad are, how are we on the brink here?
Sadly, I think we are on both sides, and I caution people, particularly now, not to use absolutes. By absolutes, I mean all black people are this, all cops are that. That's why we're in this predicament right now, because people use too many absolutes. But let me tell you something that really defines how I feel about this. I get up Friday morning and I had to go to a small community 50 miles outside of Milwaukee. And I stood there in front of the TV listening to the news, and there was another news clip about a black man being lynched right outside of Atlanta. And I'm listening to all of this. I'm thinking about when I've gone to target range in Jackson's, etc., and all these people with these automatic weapons. And I had a discussion with myself, should I take my gun with me? Not for the police, but out of fear, anxiety about how white people in these suburban or these far-out areas will respond to seeing a black man. Okay, will they retaliate?
How do you think the police, though, are going to respond?
Same way.
Well, because police, there's a book out by Heather McDonald, the War on Cops. Is there any doubt that there's a war on cops? I mean, every single cop that is out there this weekend, don't they feel that they have a target on their back?
No, and then I was listening to your show on Friday, and I was really moved by the one female police officer who called and said they're on high alert now, hyper alert. I think they've always been. I wouldn't want to be a cop today. I really wouldn't want to.
How do we dial this down? I mean, at what point do we say, look, because, I know that if this had taken place at a Tea Party rally, I know what the rhetoric would be. I know what the finger pointing would be. But is there some backing down, de-escalation of rhetoric that needs to take place now?
There must be. People got to stop, some of your callers got to stop blaming Obama for the violence. There is a move underfoot, and I heard it on Jeff Fleming's show. There's a move underfoot to try to get the governor of Minnesota out of office because he made a statement about the killing there.
Well, I think
had it been a white guy, it wouldn't have happened.
I mean, the way this is played out.
This is anti-dialogue.
But the shooting in Baton Rouge and the shooting in Minnesota looked absolutely horrible. And I think those of us who defend law enforcement need to recognize that saying that all cops are right is just as stupid as saying all cops are bad or wrong.
Absolutely.
And I think, yes.
Do you know what's going to happen? You asked what police are going to do. They've already started doing it. They're not patrolling the inner cities.
No, that's not true.
Because they are too worried. They have stopped. They have reduced their patrols, including in Baltimore, and that's happening all over the country. Why would you intentionally put yourself in harm's way to protect a few people?
You're paid to do that.
You asked how to de-escalate this.
Right.
I really paid attention over the last 24 hours, and especially this morning, or over the last weekend, excuse me, of the classy, professional response of Police Chief Chief David Brown in Dallas, and the mayor of the city, which I think his last name is Rollins. But they were wonderful. They were expressing extreme grief, but they handled the situation professionally. They basically asked people not to demonize each side and that both sides need to get together. They instigated a prayer vigil together at 12 noon. I don't see that we're automatically going over a brink here. I think this is the twin happening of these last two men being killed by police and then the 5 officers being killed as pushing people to the point of saying, okay, enough is enough.
I would like to think that that's going to happen, but my experience in recent history is that things move very, very quickly, that there is a period where people say, okay, this is going to sober us up, and then in 48 hours it wears off and we go back to our corners and you get the normal sort of finger pointing and political point scoring.
I don't want to blame the heated rhetoric because the perpetrators of the violence and their accomplices are the ones to blame here. But I do find it kind of poignant that when there were some people at the Black Lives Matter, and although it was a peaceful protest, there were some, they're posing and saying F the police and everything else. But then when the shots started ringing out from overhead, they ran toward the cops and behind the cops, and the cops ran to danger and protected those very protesters who were protesting frankly, their profession. And my hope is that we concentrate more on that and the African American police chief who saw his members of his force not as white or black or Hispanic, but as brother officers. We take kind of that approach more to everyone put on their uniforms and it's us versus them. That's the only way that
that's why I said about the absolute. That's why I say about the absolute. Yeah. And Lynn and I were going through a whole bunch of statistics prior to the show. There's been 805,000 shootings in America that police officers had to respond to. There's been 509 killings by police of citizens, the majority of whom are black. So it's a large.
Majority of them are white.
A majority of
there's a great disproportionately. But there's a large disparity there, and I agree with you. We need to come together on common ground because we need the police. There are some bad cops out there. Sure. I'm still fearful of myself.
41 cops were killed last year.
But I think two things. On my show, I think it became clear in some of the conversations I had is number one is the African American community is horrified and outraged by what happened in Dallas. But I also think that people need to realize that I think white Americans were also horrified and outraged by the shootings that took place, including that one in Minnesota where the man was just reaching for his wallet. He had a concealed carry permit and he was gunned down. But I think that what I think has happened has been this attempt to profile or stereotype, police and police officers in the criminal justice system based on a few bad actors. And I do think that rhetorically we need to back off, not try to exploit these isolated cases in the way they have. And again, I do not blame President Obama. I do not hold him responsible, but he has elevated, and I think he's elevated, some of this anti-police rhetoric, and I think that he has a responsibility now, and he has a very unique position to do this, to lower the temperature. And I hope that he does it, and I hope he does it very, very quickly this summer. What has your glass half full? What is your glass half empty? Let's go around the table. We'll start with you, Michael Holt.
Well, my glass half full because the U.S. space probe Juno has arrived at the planet Jupiter. Obviously, Star Trek will soon be a reality. My glass is half empty because we can send ships to the edge of the universe, but can't figure out who is bringing tons of drugs into the country and supplying urban terrorists with automatic weapons.
Michelle Litchens.
My glass is half empty because we are becoming a country with no rule of law. It should be half full because we are America and the pendulum should swing back. But due to the uneducated voters, I'm just half empty today.
Linda Bruin.
Well, my glass is half full because a major study ranks Wisconsin as the 13th best state to raise children in. My glass is half empty because Wisconsin still ranks as the worst state and Milwaukee the worst city to raise black children in.
Brian Fraley.
My glass is half full because we have brave men and women who bust their tails every day to keep everyone in our community safe. Everyone. It's half empty today for obvious reasons.
Well, my glass is half empty because American law enforcement officers clearly do have a target on their back. If there was any doubt that there is a war on cops, it was eliminated last Thursday night. My glass is half full because maybe this is the shock America needs to turn away from racial division and the ideological demonization of police. At least I hope so. Our Sunday Insight Countdown shows the Republican National Convention begins in just 8 days. The Democratic National Convention is just over 2 weeks away, and the presidential election is 121 days from now. We will be right back. With the GOP convention just a week away, Governor Scott Walker bows to a Trump nomination, accepting a speaking slot at the convention and saying that he intends to back Trump over Hillary Clinton.
The contrast is clear. If you don't want Hillary Clinton to be president, the only viable alternative at this point is Donald Trump. And I don't want Hillary Clinton to be president because I think she's unfit based upon what the FBI director said this week. And I think Donald Trump will definitely shake things up and put power back in the hands of the American people.
Well, that marks a double reversal for Walker. Walker had backed rival Ted Cruz in the primary, had withheld his backing of Trump until he renounced racist comments about the so-called Mexican judge presiding over the Trump University fraud case. He never did. Just weeks ago, Walker had suggested that delegates be free to vote their conscience at the convention. Now, not so much so. Why did Walker change his position on Trump?
Boy, that was an enthusiastic endorsement, wasn't it, I guess?
He's bowing to inevitability, right, though? Isn't that what it's about?
Well, I think Reince Priebus has a lot to do with it, too. You know, he's trying to helm a party that has been hijacked by Trump, a non-Republican, and they're trying to make the best of it. Very disappointed, though. I would rather have seen Scott Walker say, you know what? I'm not going to speak to a national audience because I don't embrace.
But that is a tempting, morsel for a politician,
sure
right?
Is.
You know, if he gets a primetime spot.
But look at how Cruz did it.
Yeah.
Now Cruz was obviously his chief nominee, chief rival, but Cruz didn't endorse Trump.
Yeah.
Cruz has got a speaking slot, but he didn't endorse Trump.
But Cruz could have gotten himself his own speaking slot if he had enough states to put him in nomination, right?
That's right. But I'm saying that there is a way to accept the inevitable if you're a politician without embracing Trump.
Okay, now you have written an open letter to the delegates. You're very clearly a never Trump guy.
Yes.
You've actually called for freeing the delegates. Is that possible? What are the chances that's
It's still
happen?
possible. It's harder when the two delegates on the Rules Committee from Wisconsin say, chastise those of us who don't embrace Trump.
But they need
it's still possible. They need 28 of the 112 people, 28 members of the Rules Committee to get a minority report to be voted on the floor of the convention.
Okay, so is Walker positioning himself for something in the future?
He heard himself quite a bit.
Or is he thinking, I'll be in the hall, I'll give this fantastic speech, and if lightning strikes and the delegates open up, they might turn to me, or what is this?
I don't know. There's a lot of people in Never Trump who wanted Walker.
And maybe there's a unicorn waiting for me outside the studio here.
That's what you're alluding to with that statement.
Yeah.
I'm sad that I'm disappointed that Scott Walker's speaking again because he was actually standing out there saying we can't endorse Donald Trump because he hasn't rescinded some of the or retracted some of the statements that he made. But like you said, it is hard to give up that primetime speaking spot. But again, as a supporter of Scott Walker's and as someone who is not excited about Donald Trump, I really wish he would have put his foot down and said, I'm not going to participate in this.
Yeah,
Donald Trump is not our candidate.
Yeah, but now he's going to be known as one of the Republican candidates who gave up his ideals in order to gain a national speaking spot. I understand that he wants to get back in the national limelight, that when he left, he wasn't doing so hot. But that's a pretty big price. Your own ethics is a pretty big price to pay to get to do a speech. And the quid pro quo couldn't have seemed more obvious. He backs Trump, he gets to make the speech.
Michael,
I don't think that was
it
part of
looked
the
like
equation.
that,
You know, but, I mean, let's face it, he was between a rock and a hard place, or between a Trump and a Hillary. Either way you want to look at it. To denounce Trump means, in essence, I'm supporting Hillary. I mean, that's the way he's going.
No,
what does it mean?
You know what? A lot of Republicans
if you don't
have
vote,
figured
what
out.
does it mean?
You know what? A lot of Republicans have figured out the way to finesse this. Basically, you don't talk about it. You stay home. You have something else to do. You got to even mow the lawn that week. A lot of people aren't showing up. What is interesting that both Paul Ryan and Scott Walker sort of went through this drama of looking like they were going to, stand up to Donald Trump and then caving in. And I agree with Brian Fraley. This is Reince Priebus, who has apparently morphed into now the #1 enabler for Donald Trump. And the sad part,
That's his job.
The sad part, though, is that Wisconsin was was supposed to be the firewall of rationality in the Republican Party, and now it is, I think, in large part because of Reince Priebus kind of becoming the Vichy Republicans. You may not want to hear it, but we'll tell you anyway. Let's hand out some unsolicited advice. Michael Holt, you're first.
Well, mine is the former school board president, Michael Bonds. The resignation of DeMond Means as a commissioner for the Opportunity District leaves a void only you have the credibility to fill. The needs of our children should outweigh the needs of political considerations. Become the next commissioner.
Michelle Litchens.
Well, to Sean Hannity, if you really believe you can trust James Comey more than Speaker Paul Ryan, maybe you should consider changing parties.
Linda Bruin.
Parents, if you have a fourth grader, consider visiting a national park. To celebrate the Park Service's 100th anniversary, all fourth graders and their families can get free passes to all national parks, lands, and waters through August 31st.
Brian Fraley.
When events like Thursday night unfold, don't jump to conclusions and draw your conclusions in real time on social media. Your brilliance can wait a bit until we get a better idea of what's going on.
Well, my advice is if you intend to break any federal laws, this is for all of you, if you intend to shield yourself from prosecution, you might want to consider this one trick. Change your name to Clinton. Hey, it works for them. Next on Sunday Insight, Hillary Clinton's week of good news, bad news. It was a decidedly mixed week for Hillary Clinton. The good news is she won't face criminal charges for her use of a private email server. The bad news? FBI Director James Comey's statement dismantled most of the defenses she had offered, making it clear that many of her statements over the last year and a half had been untrue. And the FBI Director also described her handling of sensitive information as extremely careless. Critics, including House Speaker Paul Ryan, said the decision not to charge Clinton suggested that she was being treated as someone who was above the law. Your reaction, Michelle?
She is being treated as someone who is above the law. But we all know this, right? I mean, this is already baked into the cake. No one trusts Hillary. They haven't trusted her for years. She's gotten away with this while her husband was in the White House. So we shouldn't expect
How badly will this hurt her?
Unfortunately, I don't think it will hurt her very bad.
Okay, your reaction.
Look, first of all, she's not being treated differently. Under this statute, only one person has been prosecuted in over 100 years,
and
it was for espionage. If you listen to Comey's testimony,
grossly negligent.
If you listen to Comey's testimony before Congress, there is no way any reasonable person could have indicted her. And what's driving me crazy here is that she hasn't. There's no evidence at all that these 110 emails were hacked by anyone, were misused. There's no evidence that she
I would not bet the farm on any of this.
Well, okay, but I didn't do the investigation.
Okay, number one, the law says grossly negligent.
1% of the emails
grossly
were marked.
negligent.
1/3 of 1%.
What is the distinction between? I'd be fascinated to know. Extremely careless and grossly negligent. Also, are you willing to sit here and argue that Hillary Clinton was not exposed by James Comey as having lied over and over and over again?
Well, first of all, I listened to the 4.5 hours, and he would not say that.
Yeah, I know.
He would not say that. And the bottom line is,
have you listened to what she said?
Well, if you let me finish, I'll tell you. I think that is a weak spot for her.
A weak spot.
And I do think that Congress is going to, particularly a Republican Congress, is going to look into it. But frankly, even if it was a Democratic Congress, I wouldn't have a problem with them looking into it. But the bottom line is,
she lied. Over and over and over.
Well, that's we just talked about not overreacting. Until Comey and there's more investigations on that piece, I'm not going there.
Well,
how bad this has hurt her?
Let me see. What I don't get is why they drop reruns of Family Feud to put Comey's press conference on, because we knew what the outcome was going to be.
I don't know. I thought
survey says.
You know what? This is probably not going to hurt her as much as it ought to. Number one, because the Republicans are about to nominate the one candidate in America who cannot take advantage of it. Number two, I agree with you that this is baked in the cake. And number three, that we're sitting here on a Sunday morning and it already feels like old news. What is it you don't get this week? Let's go around the table. Michael Holt.
Well, my other one is. Last week I mentioned that gas was 30 cents cheaper in Madison, but I just realized it's 20 cents more expensive in the central city than outlying areas. I guess instead of the minimum markup, we have a ghetto minority markup.
Michelle Litchens.
Charlie, I don't get why Russ Feingold doesn't have to answer for Hillary's unethical behavior, but Ron Johnson is constantly expected to defend Donald Trump.
Linda Bruin.
Well, I don't get Donald Trump and Republican congressmen trying to smear James Comey because he didn't recommend indicting Hillary Clinton. Comey is a Republican who's widely respected on both sides of the aisle.
Brian Fraley.
Was. What I don't get is how our president continues to focus on the instruments of violence and not on the evildoers, regardless of race, religion, or motivations.
Well, what I don't get is why the Republican establishment, including here in Wisconsin, are so anxious to crush opposition to Donald Trump, even as it becomes clearer and clearer that his nomination means electoral annihilation this fall. Next on Sunday Insight, our panel picks the winners and losers of the week. But first, here's your morning news update. It is time for our panel to pick the winners and losers of the week. Michael Holt, you are first.
My loser, Ebony Magazine, has been taken over by an equity firm. That means it joins Essence Magazine and BET as non-black owned black media. That doesn't even sound right. My winner, Bernie Sanders. He didn't get the nomination, but he has been able to get the Democratic Party to adopt several of his campaign planks. That doesn't mean they're going to do anything, but it looks good going into the next election.
Michelle Hitchens.
Well, Speaker Paul Ryan is once again the winner for being the adult in the room by telling our country that it is not the time to run into our respective ideological corners. It's time to come together as Americans. The losers are inner city residents. The Ferguson effect is causing law enforcement to step back from patrolling inner cities, giving the Black Lives Matter what they're asking for. Less police, while law-abiding citizens are held hostage in their homes.
Linda Bruin.
Well, my heroes are the Dallas police officers who were murdered or injured last week. Their fellow officers who were being shot at but still risked their lives to protect protesters. And Mayor Rollins and Police Chief Brown for how they've responded. My loser is Rio de Janeiro, whose financial crisis is so bad the Olympics are at risk and essential public services are being rationed. Olympic athletes risk getting sick from the waterways and the Zika virus. They risk muggers and civil unrest, while police officers who haven't been paid in months carry signs saying, "Welcome to hell."
Brian Fraley.
Could have been worse. They could have been in Chicago. To the men and women of law enforcement in Wisconsin, including my family members and friends on forces in Franklin, Milwaukee, New Berlin, and elsewhere, we thank you, we love you, we appreciate you, and we recognize that we need you. You are the winners. When we work together to make our neighborhood safer. As for all losers, I'll pass today, if you don't mind.
Well, my loser, the rule of law. What we saw last week was that there is one set of rules for the powerful and the elite, another set of rules for the rest of us. It's hard not to be cynical. Winners, America's law enforcement officers, because after last week's tragedies, it is time to remind ourselves the vast majority of cops are decent, professional, and courageous, and we should not judge them by the actions of a handful of bad actors. So, if you have the chance, this might be a good time for you to thank them for their service. And thanks for joining us. And join me for my radio show Monday morning on News Radio 620 WTMJ from 8:30 until noon. Have a great week.